one person here in the crowd, and it's a mentor that I haven't seen for many years. It's Sergeant Major retired Ray Robinson was my detachment Sergeant Major. I would tell you with great confidence that without him I would not be standing up here today. So again, Sergeant Major, it's great seeing you, and thank you for your mentorship, and God bless you. Good morning. Thank you so much for the warm reception. And first off, I want to thank General Carvler for the opportunity to speak here this morning. It's a busy month for me. So this is the 6th engagement I've had this month for AAPI. But you know, when the opportunity came up to come here, I jumped at it immediately because, you know, if you've served in the Pentagon before, it's like being in jail. And being able to come out for a few days was just a great blessing. So that was terrific. But interestingly, when I received the invitation, you know, I knew General Carville. I replaced him in on the G8 staff, so I thought it was going to be a little bit more personal, like you know, Vietnam. You know, I want you to come and speak, but it was generic, and it was like the invitation went to requesting for the most handsome and powerful Asian American flag officer on the Army staff to come, and unbeknownst to many of you, I'm currently the only Asian flag officer in the Army staff proper. So by default, probably the most handsome, dashing, and brilliant as well. So there you have it. But you know, when I arrived here, you know, I had a short office call with General Carville this morning. And that's when the truth actually came out, you know, and they're like, sir, we actually had three outstanding selectees, and General Carville chose you. And I said, okay, I mean, I'm certainly not as interesting or as qualified as the other two great speakers. I'm like, no, sir, he wanted you to come because you remind him of his childhood man crush, John Wayne. And I don't know why folks are laughing, but because John and I are basically identical. We both commanded the 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry of the great 82nd Airborne Division. He did it in the movie The Longest Day. I was actually in Samara with 2 Panther. Both of us are models of rugged masculinity. All right, that was not a joke. I don't know. I don't really appreciate the extra heckling stuff. But he's all 6'5", and I'm 5'6". But I know we have, how many Vietnamese Americans we have here? Okay, a bunch of them, right? And you know 5'6", that's a huge Vietnamese, right? And both of us played football at the University of Southern California. He played line in the 1920s. I actually had more than 1,000 yards receiving. You guys know about the Vietnamese American pro player, NFL, Dat Nguyen, who played for the Cowboys. Also All-American at Texas A&M, linebacker. I pretty much taught him everything he knew about football. But actually, that was probably not true. And my football skills was only intramural. But I know it's USC, right? It's a school with great football tradition. I know a lot of heckling probably came from you know, those hateful SEC fans. You got? Okay, great. Okay, I can tell you one thing, ma'am. My alma mater, we've actually given back more Heisman trophies and national championships than you have. And that's something you can probably Google. But I know for a fact, 20 minutes from now, when I'm done with speaking, all those hateful SEC fans will be coming up here and be, sir, I've been so inspired by your speech, and trying to give me a hug and all that stuff, and things will be okay. But maybe not. But I don't know why I'm talking about that, because that's not part of the topic. I do believe that I have a relevant message to contribute to this year's AAPI theme of walk together, embrace differences, and build legacies. And I'm going to do that through a story that I knew fairly well. This is an excerpt from something I had penned several years ago, when actually the AAPI keynote speaker fell through, and And I was a major, and they looked at me and they said, okay, you're Asian, get up there and start speaking. And this is 1975, April 27th, at Tan Son Nhat Air Base. And the brilliant sun marked the beginning of another beautiful day, and through the radio, we found the situation outside the airport dire. Major South Vietnamese units blocking the North Vietnamese Army's advance were obliterated and murdered wholesale. To our chagrin, 2 South Vietnamese A-37 Cessna aircraft led by turncoat pilots bombed the airport the same afternoon. The sight of these aircraft made us cower under our parents. My father looked up, and I remember him chuckling and saying for us not to be afraid because we were missing out on a monumental event in history. His coolness gave us assurance that things would be okay. However, the aerial bombardment was followed by barrages of 130mm artillery and 60mm mortar. I remember several people close by were hit by mortar fire. And we heard their protean groans, and we prayed for our own salvation. I was scared to death. I was laying on my belly by my mom, and I clearly heard the intense palpitation of my heart. And I did the only thing that I knew how. I recited my Hail Marys. We managed to live through the day, but with serious degradation of hope, and to add to the misery, we found out that the United States has ceased all fixed-wing aircraft operations due to high anti-aircraft threat in the area. So on the 28th, the mood at the airport was apathetic. People seemed to have lost all hope. I saw ghostly apparitions walking around with empty eyes, clothes and suitcases strewn everywhere. I was unsure what the future had in store for us, but I knew as long as my stalwart father was with us that things would be okay. In the afternoon, a young U.S. Marine captain and a radio operator walked up towards us and asked for an English speaker. You know, my dad was an English literature major at the University of Saigon, so he spoke fluent English. And I saw him stood up and talk to these men for a few minutes, and at the conclusion, my father began giving general instructions to all the males in the area to begin clearing debris from the tarmac to allow helicopters from the 7th Fleet to conduct a rotary wing extraction. Several of the males became belligerent. My dad had to calm them with his drawn Colt 45. And at sunset, we saw a series of Marine CH-53s make the final approach towards Tan Son Nhat Air Base. And unbeknownst to us, this was the start of Operation Frequent Wind, which would eventually fly numerous Marine and Air Force sorties, airlifting tens and thousands of Vietnamese from South Vietnam onto the ships of the 7th U.S. Fleet. So on the 29th, thousands of Vietnamese began the orderly evacuation. The only possession we were allowed to take was a suitcase with essential documents and a few hundred US dollars. When directed by the Marines, we loaded the lumbering CH-53s, and within a few minutes we're at altitude. I remember stretching my neck out to observe communist tracers coming up at us and the Marine door gunner returning fire in kind. Thankfully, the rest of the flight was uneventful. And when the aircraft landed after a short flight, we had no idea where we were. Some people thought we were on some island off the coast of Vietnam. And when we walked off the aircraft, my dad told us we were embarked on a carrier USS Hancock. I remember tugging on his shirt and asking him what this meant. And I remember him saying, "This means that nothing in the world can harm you now." We cruised on the aircraft carrier for 3 days, and on the 4th day we debarked at the Subic Bay, the Philippines, and eventually made our way to an established refugee camp at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. And during our stay in Arkansas, my father received numerous generous offers from friends in the U.S., his former advisors, as well as the French government. You know, he was a French commando, a decorated French commando with a couple of étoiles d'armée, silver stars from the French army, and the French government was ready to take us in. However, in the end, he boldly chose California. He was also a South Vietnamese Marine Corps officer, and he had spent many, many months training in San Diego, and he knew that California provided the best environment for assimilation and upward mobility. So after 3 months at Fort Chaffee, my father moved the family to Los Angeles, California, where we lived with our sponsor, Mr. Mike Casey. But after a few weeks, my father asked to move out to alleviate the strains on the Caseys. So with several $100s and dreams of greatness, we moved to an impoverished part of Los Angeles, and my father began working immediately as an armed security guard, the only thing he knew to do. My two oldest sisters, already brilliant students in college in Vietnam, had to go into the workforce. And my oldest sister went to work at a sweatshop in Chinatown, and my second sister pumped gas at a busy intersection near Hollywood and Vine. The rest of us went to school with one goal in mind, and that's to succeed. And my oldest sister, having been exposed to labor that she was not accustomed to, came home crying on numerous occasions because she was not simply skilled enough to produce what the sweatshop owners wanted. And my second oldest sister, soon after, was robbed at gunpoint at the gas station where, there you. He pointed a gun at her head, and liberty, freedom, and aside, this was not the American dream that we had envisioned. So my father decided immediately then that my sisters would continue schooling while vice working, and the burden of work would fall on my parents, and he expanded his work schedule to beyond 80 hours, and my mom soon joined him after working at a fast food restaurant. So parenting duties fell squarely on my two oldest sisters, who were total disciplinarians. And I know the Vietnamese Americans in here can probably relate to that. They ensured we ate our dinners, took our baths, did our homework. Getting a B in school was catastrophic, so you might as well not even go to school at all if you're going to bring a B home. My oldest sister was given total authority over us, and she sat with us every night to supervise our homework, of course with spanking ruler always in hand or within reach. And you know, behind her back, we called her the Dragon Lady after the cruelest Empress of China. And but I will tell you, after these many years, we would not have succeeded without the Dragon Lady. We never had money to eat out. We wore clothes from Goodwill. We never took a family vacation or any vacation, as a matter of fact, but we chose how we lived our lives, and we had the liberties and the rights to do that. I spent quality time with my father by going to work with him on the weekends, often sleeping on somebody else's office carpet while my father was doing all his mandatory checks. And that was one of the ways we mitigated the challenge of not having Dad at home. 39 years later, and almost 10 years after my dad's passing, those were truly the best moments that I spent with my dad. So several years later, my two oldest sisters graduated from college, and they immediately found jobs and contributed their entire salary to the family finance. And my father soon found a job as a public social services worker, working for the DPSS to help other Vietnamese Americans adapt to life in the U.S. And the rest of us, we continue our schooling with one goal in mind, is to make our parents proud. And by 1979, we had enough money to buy a modest home in West Hollywood, and with solid guidance and family support, we took turns earning scholarships, and we became attorneys, biologists, computer scientists, CPAs, LPNs, media producers. And I just have to tell you, unfortunately, you know, the other half of the family had to go to a public institution called UCLA across the town, and you know, known to us as "You Clowns Lost Again." 39 years later, I became the Deputy Commanding General of the storied 1st Cav Division, and all my 7 sisters successfully graduated from college. And I will tell you, our success was predicated by many factors, aforementioned, but truly rested on a single fact, and that's being American. Being Americans mean that we were afforded the opportunity to embrace the wondrous privileges given to us by our Constitution and realize our immense dream. This fabled story only happens in America. And I'm American by choice and not by birth, and I've chosen to serve our great nation as a 9-year-old. Because I believe that everything that our nation stands for. America to the world is what the USS Hancock was to the Vietnamese in 1975. And I offer that to you as one of the reasons why men and women continue to raise their right hands to put themselves in harm's way to protect their way of life. And I think perhaps the words of Adlai Stevenson describe it best when he says, when an American says that he loves his country, he means not only that he loves the New England hills, the prairies glistening in the sun, the wide and rising plains, the great mountains and the sea. He means that he loves an inner air, an inner light in which freedom lives, and in which a person can draw a breath of self-respect. So the first thing that I ask you to walk away here with is really, while it's important to celebrate these ethnic observances and embrace diversity and all the great things that go with this, it's also important to love our nation and our ideals above all else, and to profess this love through faithful and honorary service. And I'm not just talking about our uniformed men and women, but also for our great civilian workforce and all the things you do for our nation in that capacity. The great writer Michael Sharon, one of my favorite books, Killer Angels, when he was describing Josh Chamberlain, the hero of Gettysburg and the commander of 20th Maine on Little Round Top, he says his faith in this country is stronger than his faith in God, because this is a land where no man had to bow. And I'm a man of faith, and I don't mean that as any disrespect to our Lord and Savior, but I mean that rhetorically, because I think that those words are so profound that it really beautifully describes our nation. The second thing that I'm asking you to do is continue to take good care of our men and women, our most precious resources. And I'm going to take a little bit of diversions here. I know we're supposed to be talking about Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Week, but I take every opportunity to talk about the great men and women I've served with. And this is one of the chances, the few chances I got to do that. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about PFC Robinson, Sergeant Bugatis, Specialist Lopez, and the men of Reaper Team 2, which consisted of Staff Sergeant Josh Marlin, Specialist Tracy Willis, Specialist Eric Moser, and PFC Chris Corbel. Nick Robinson was with me in Afghanistan in 2010 in eastern Afghanistan, a very remote outpost. At this stage of the campaign, eastern Afghanistan was a very evil place, a lot of bad guys that we were dealing with. And Nick Robinson was on a platoon patrol base, about 20 troopers from 1st Battalion, 187 Infantry, Rakhisan. And we were doing combined action. We had one U.S. platoon with one Afghan platoon. And the Afghan National Army was doing pretty well, so we figured we need to spend some time with the Afghan border police. So, as you would have it, we were on a remote location. Weather was bad, so the enablers and air and ISR and all that stuff weren't in place. So the Taliban decided to make a run for it. They had about 200 Talibans, and they decided to mass on this U.S. platoon with some poorly trained Afghan border police. They started the attack. They led with a vehicle bomb with about 15 suicide bombers with suicide vests following. Robinson was at his position with about 4 other Afghan policemen, and they all ran away when the heavy fighting started. So Robinson, by himself, he had a Madus 50 cal machine gun. He was holding off about 30 crazed Taliban. And for those of you guys who know Afghanistan, you know the Taliban is not as brave as they are, because a lot of them are drugged up and they're pretty motivated based on that. And Robinson was fighting with all he had. And when his 50 cal ran out of ammo, he started grabbing an Afghan PKM machine gun and started fighting with that. When that ran out, he started fighting with his M4 and then an AK. And realizing the bad guys were trying to breach the entry control point. My boys at the gate engaged, destroyed the vehicle, but it had so much explosives that it knocked them out from the tower. So Robinson, seeing this danger, all he had was an AK now he had grabbed from an Afghan. He ran out there and started fighting. He killed 3 suicide bombers. The last one was right, almost nearly by his feet. Not only being able to hold off the attack, but basically saving that entire platoon. And for his action, he was awarded the Silver Star. Kid was 19 years old. Minnesota. That was his first combat action during the war. Brandon Bugatis was with my 1st Battalion, 33 Cav, the Rista Squadron, part of 3rd Brigade, 101st Airborne. He was with me in 2010. He had been to multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, been wounded 7 times, albeit light enough to walk away from, but this time he was bad. So I rushed to the combat hospital, and due to the gravity of his wounds, he was getting evac'd to launch through to get better care. So I ran to the cache, I flew in there, grabbed him, and he came out of the operating room and he said, "Sir, I want you to re-enlist me for 6 years." I'm like, "You gotta be crazy." He's like, "Sir, no, I want you to re-enlist for 6 years." And I say, "This could probably wait." And he said, "No, sir." I go, "I was planning on re-enlisting this morning. I'm not gonna let some Taliban change my course of action." And I said, "Okay, where do you want to go? I mean, do you want to go to a place where you're not going to be exposed to the same danger, or do you want to change your career path, or you're not a cavalryman anymore?" He says, "No, sir." He says, "If I heal, I want to come right back here into Afghanistan to fight along my brothers, because there isn't a place I would rather be in. There isn't another unit I would rather fight with." Brandon Bugatis, great American. Specialist Lopez was in 1st Battalion, 187, on the same rotation with me. And at that stage of the campaign, we'd come into theater, and we got great intelligence that they had some sanctuaries that the Taliban were using. And you know, our collective position was like, hey, we're the Story Rakasans from Hamburger Hill, from the Korean War with 2 combat jumps. We're not going to let some Taliban be hanging around on our AR. So we're like, hey, we're going after them. So I issued the orders for 1st Battalion, Lopez's battalion, to go into action. And you know, it started out just as we were asking for, because Taliban wanted to fight and they were staying to fight, so we're going to give it to them. And by mid-afternoon, things were going pretty well, you know. We were putting the wood to them, you know. I had lost some men. And Lopez was wounded pretty bad by rocket-propelled grenades. So he had to be evac'd out. So I was on a C-2 bird. I flew down to the cache to see some of my fallen warriors and give them their hero flights. Swung by to see Lopez at the combat support hospital with my other troops. And he came out of surgery, and they're like, "Sir, he wants to talk to you because he's still conscious." So I went out there, and he was blinded in both eyes. He was severely wounded. He couldn't see. And since he couldn't see, I grabbed his arm and I said, "Lopez, this is Rakasan 6. I said, you're going to be okay, son. We're going to get you to launch to it. The docs are great. You're just going to be just fine." And he wasn't worried about his own condition. He didn't ask a darn question about his condition. He said, "Sir," he goes, "where's Jeremy Brown? PFC Brown." And I stood there in awkward silence because I didn't have the guts to tell him that Brown and some of my other troops had given their all and had made the ultimate sacrifice. And he was getting weak, so before he passed out, he grabbed my elbow and he whispered, he says, "Rock 6, I want you to know, sir, that I did my best out there for you." That was Afghanistan. Many similar stories from there. I also had the privilege of serving with great troopers when I was in Iraq, when I was the commander of 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry, 2 Panther, part of 82nd Airborne. We were sent to a very evil place called Samara. Some of you guys may have seen that or been there or been serving around there. You know, the bad guys, you remember, they blew up the Golden Mosque and started all that sectarian violence in 2006. We were sent there to stabilize the area, and I had some great paratroopers with me. And you know, for most folks in the adjacent sector, they had enough success to be able to promote governance and work on development and projects and all that stuff. For us, we were just straight up fighting and dying in Samara. Reaper Team 2 with Josh Morley, 26 years old. We were there for 15 months, and he had been probably on 100 operations similar to this. You know, we were going after a high-level Al-Qaeda in Iraq, AQI, and we thought we had them cornered on Sigid. Charlie Company did a raid, and we had Reaper Team 2 in Overwatch. And one of our techniques is we normally try to leave some snipers that stay behind to watch the objective, to continue reporting, and if possible, maybe target these bad guys when they try to come back into the objective. And they were pros at this, and had some remarkable success, but it was a bad day for us because we were compromised and I had no idea, at the battalion headquarters, the staff, we were totally clueless that some locals had tipped off the bad guys. And there were about 30 longbeards, right? I'm talking about AQI, I'm not talking about Iraq former regime element, made a run and try to assault this position of 4 snipers. Morley and Tracy Willis fought heroically. But within minutes, they were killed. And as you're aware, at this stage, Petraeus was coming in the theater, and he was ready to, he was getting ready to provide the assessment to the president. And it was very important for the bad guys at this phase to possibly capture an American or to grab a dead body of one of our soldiers and parade that around the street to try to gain a strategic victory. And so throughout this firefight, they were on the roof, and these bad guys repeatedly tried to grab Morley's body, all right, to take it with them. But Corval and Moser would have none of that. They fought with everything they had, with their M24 sniper weapons. We always carry an extra M4. They fought with their M4, and then a machine gun is all they had. And the quick reaction force was merely 10 minutes away. But by the time the quick reaction force has gotten there, there were bodies of bad guys stacked up, long beards. We had lost Moser and, we had lost Tracy Willis and Josh Morley. And Corval and Moser had nothing left. They were black on ammunition, and all they had were their knives on them. They were subsequently awarded our nation's second highest honor for valor, which is the Distinguished Service Cross, and I had the honor of watching President Bush personally pin that on him. For Josh Morley, I remember just 2 weeks before that, I was talking to him about operations, and he told me, he said, "Sir, when this mission's over with, I'm scheduled to go on R&R, and I'm going to get to meet my newborn daughter, which I haven't had a chance to see." And regrettably, we couldn't help him make that happen, But we did bring back his remains so he could be buried with the proper honor. And he's resting there on his family land in North Carolina. And that's the least we could do. So, it's always hard for me to retell these stories, right? But I think it's pretty important that they be told, all right? You don't see that in mainstream media. You don't see it in a lot of these talks. But it has to be told. Because I feel like it's my duty to tell these stories and to be able to tell it to their kids and their relatives, and also to the rest of you, so we can preserve their legacies. Because your job here is principally important, because everything you do here are going to support the warfighter in the field, and you have to do your due diligence and justice so that way they are given the best equipment in the world. All right, so I want to applaud you for that, because serving is a thing that can be done in many ways, and again, I appreciate that. So it's great that we're here celebrating AAPI month, but this is an opportunity to take time to reflect on the tremendous sacrifices that must be invested so that we could have events like this. So with Memorial Day coming up, okay, I ask that you take a few minutes to reflect on the sacrifices of our forefathers and of our comrades. And again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I'm obviously proud to be Vietnamese, and I'm very proud to be Asian American, but you know what? I'm just proud just to be American. the world. It's really a great privilege to serve. God bless you all. God bless ATEC and the rest of the commands, and God bless our great nation. Thank you.
You know, after a speech like that, I really have to come out of my prepared